Hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. OdatNurd here, and welcome to tonight's live stream where we will continue working on the piano code that we were working with in the last stream, which, frankly, being only a week ago, kind of eludes my mind what exactly it was that we did there. I think working on changing the MIDI program. We have a few different things that we're going to be working on in this plugin, refactoring some code. Ostensibly with an eye towards making it better than it currently is. Um, well, that is a subjective term, but we're always trying to, add more features, I guess is a better way to say that. I don't want to impugn the code. It does what it's supposed to do, and that's awesome. But we do have, we being Keith and I, that is Keith, the person that came up with the idea for this plugin, have a lot of ideas for things that we'd like to see in it. And this is very much one of those projects whereby you start with a proof of concept, can I actually do this thing? And then once you get that working, then you start working toward fine tuning it, adding in features, and that can require modifying existing code. So somebody talking behind me there. So that is something that happens a lot in the software development world. So if you were getting into something like this, like say for example, you were working towards learning how to write your own packages and plugins in Sublime Text, and you hadn't already noticed that down in the description of all these videos, I have another channel where I do weekly Sublime Text tutorials, and uh, the video series on Plugin 101 is kicking off last week, and the next video is coming up next Monday. Starting in on that, that would be a good time to do that. That one of the things you might encounter while you're working towards something like that is thinking that everything is a bit overwhelming, which, to be honest, is can sometimes be the case for everybody. But the trick is to narrow things down to small, manageable bites. No matter how complicated an overall task seems to be, you can usually find some small part of it that you can accomplish, and you do that. And now part of that impossible task is done. And now you choose another part of this task that you can do, small bites. Trying to focus too much on the big picture all at once can be a recipe for panic and disaster. And going back over things and saying, now that I've done some other things, I know I should have done this part a little bit different. In retrospect, I, could have done it that way, but I didn't. But I have the ability to fix it now, and you end up with being able to, do something complicated. So that is sort of the general idea, I think, of all of the live streams that I've done. So many of them now. It's been over a year of more or less weekly live streams, less weeks when I'm sick. Is that you can do this? It seems hard, but that's just because you don't have the experience. Everything you do gets easier with time, and even people that seem to like they know what they're doing in controlled circumstances still make weird dumb bugs. So we're going to go ahead and jump on into the stream here. So pardon me while I look over here and choose the appropriate item, which I think shall be this one. And then I think all I have to do is click this button and something exciting will happen. It worked. Um, I almost accidentally stopped the recording instead of switching out of studio mode, but what can you do? So now we are into the live stream proper. Hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. Here we are in Sublime, and we will be doing some plugin development work on this piano plugin spearheaded by Keith Hall. You may know him better as King Keith. He is one of the members of the Stealthy and Hasty Sublime Text organization, me being the other. We call ourselves a couple of Sublime Text ninjas, and he is my best friend. So he came up with the idea for this particular plugin, and he had a proof of concept, and we are modifying it and working towards some existing or some new features that we would like to add. And just as a test here, I did test this prior, but I should be able to play that. Hopefully that comes across. I did some audio tests prior to the stream. Hopefully this audio level is audible. I don't want to drown anybody out with, or myself out with a lot of noise, but that stops one key too short. But I would want to make sure that since we're doing something MIDI related, that you can actually hear stuff. Hello, Ashwin. Welcome to the stream. We are about to embark on an epic level of refactoring of this code. As a matter of fact, I have a list of the things that we will be attempting to complete right here. And these are sort of building on one over the other. Overall, the idea of things that we would like to do in the stream, we can sort of see some things there, and we'll go through this as time goes on, is there is a command called, I'll give this one the focus down here, show piano in this, which opens the piano file if it's not already open. It's currently using the open file command to do that, and this is just a text file. As you can see, the tab name is piano ASCII. I think my computer in the other room is replaying my live stream. Or my phone is. Weird. I may or may not have to take a brief intermission to go pause that because I can hear it coming from behind me and it's a little weird. But this is a text file of this piano layout. It has a syntax definition in place that is making the white keys white and the black keys black and the solfege notes the color that they are. And the overall plan is to potentially have more of these. This one is sized for the keyboard that Keith has. And overall, the idea of this is to have a piano note waterfall teach you how to play piano. And also, this thing can play back MIDI files. That's something I added. He also has something that he created that will, as a matter of fact, I don't even know if I ever actually showed that, but there's this folder named Tunes here. And we could open this particular thing, and I believe we should be able to play this thing. This is a... I don't know how to stop the thing, though, mind you. Tune? There you go. This is what he started with originally. This is actually a format that's from QBasic, I believe, and the play command there. This was the proof of concept in can we get this thing to play notes. I added in the ability to take raw MIDI input, as we saw in the last stream, and to play back MIDI files. Now work is continuing in being able to convert a file like this into a MIDI file, being able to play back in the keyboard using the keys or the mouse, and have it record one of those tune files or save directly to a MIDI file and things of that nature. And what we're going to try to do tonight is because this, as I said, is a piano file that's based on his exact keyboard layout for the keyboard that he has available for himself. There is a plan to be able to have different kinds of piano displays here, perhaps with fewer keys or maybe left hand, right hand splits or something along those lines. So ultimately things would still work the same, and it's a different file that needs to be displayed. So we're going to try and factor all of that stuff away. And additionally, we want there to be only one of these windows available throughout an instance of Sublime, because a lot of the commands we're using are, for example, the play MIDI command is an application command. So there's only ever one instance of that. That's the only one that's going to be able to play things. There should really only be one keyboard. At least that's the plan for right now. So we have a few ideas about how to work all of that stuff out. And before we continue, I am in fact going to just very quickly jump to an intermission because I can't tell what's happening behind me back there. So I'll be back in just a second. I've never actually gotten a chance to use this, so we'll see how well it works. All right, we're back, and I don't know why it played the logo because that's not a part of that scene. However, I did manage to get to the other room to my laptop just in time to see it play in all of its glory. So, hooray, extra intro to the stream. I had a tab open because I was changing the thumbnail for the stream, and apparently I left it open, and it took it upon itself to just automatically play back the stream when the time came. All right, so with that little bit of nonsense out of the way, let's jump into the changes that we're going to attempt to make here. And there's quite a few of these. And the first one is factor piano prefs to be a function. Now we can actually see that here. And if we jump to plugin loaded, well, which is that one, we can see what we're actually doing is calling sublime.load settings here to load the settings for this package. That's going to be a global object we can see up there on line 17. And then in all of the places where, oops, we're looking for piano prefs, we can see we use this to get various settings. So we're getting the input and output port names, getting the available ports and potentially automatically selecting one, and a variety of things. So we also have some setting happening in here as well. So this is a global preferences object. We're going to swap this out for something that I've done in a few of my packages, which is a function, which, oops, we'll be able to call to be able to do this. So we can see here, instead of being a settings object, we're going to create a function with the same name, and you can pass it the name of the setting and it will return it back for you. We're going to cache the settings object as a property inside of the function, and it's also going to store its own default values. This is something I like to do because when you use the settings interface to get a setting, You can specify what the value should be for the setting when you call it if that setting doesn't actually exist. And in all of the places currently in this plugin where we're doing that, we're explicitly passing none there as the default, which is what the value is anyway, but it's nice to be explicit in cases like that when you know that there can be a default. So we're going to, I like the idea, and this is just myself, but Keith seemed to be okay with it, is that if you have something that has the ability to return a function and it has its own settings, defaults for those settings baked into it, then if for some reason the preferences file goes away or you add a new preference and you don't update that preferences thing, you can just go ahead and be safe in the knowledge that if you call the function to get the value of a setting, even if this preferences file doesn't exist, something sensible will be returned back to you, which makes life a little bit easier. And in this case, we're only going to do that. We also want to be able to do this, which is there should be a second argument here, because in this case, unlike most of the plugins that I work in, where very rarely does it ever actually modify its own settings. That's usually something that the user does by going to the preferences menu to do that. Here in this particular package, we are doing that because when you select an input port or an output port for the MIDI operation or a program, as we saw in last week's stream, then it does want to save that preference for you automatically. So we're going to modify this such that it has the ability to do that as well. And that's the first thing we're going to do, because everything we're doing is sort of building on those various things. So what I'm going to do is go to this package, because I happen to know I have this method right here, and we're going to need a couple of parts of this. We're going to need this, and this is a function, so we're going to put this at the top. Can one change the highlighting of words found by find and find in files? You can. The color of the outline that it uses is something that you can set in the preferences, if that's what you mean. The stuff that's currently around up here, those are settings that are part of the color scheme. Most color schemes don't tend to provide it, so as a result, you end up with the white. And I think you can even do something like. We did color scheme, and we'll have to do that, I suppose. Find highlight. The background color of text matched by the find highlight find panel, and the color that overrides the scope-based text color of text matched by the find panel. So there you go. You could set both of these settings. They're global settings based on find. The other one is this one, the border color for matches and the highlight matches option. These three options here control that sort of thing. As far as most color schemes I've seen, and admittedly I haven't looked at a ton of them, a lot of them don't tend to provide that, because I think the defaults that Sublime synthesizes just sort of match text colors directly. But that is in fact something that you can modify. That's a good question. The other thing we're going to need here is in the plugin loaded. Whoops. Sorry. Yeah, it's going to be up here, isn't it? It's going to be the loaded. We're going to need something like this as well. Well, I mean, that's a little busier than technically we need it to be, but that is okay. And that would go in plugin loaded like so. So we'll set that. And we have this, so we can throw this away for now. And new value equals none. Okay, so this one, we'll remove the comment from this for now. Now, what we're gonna do here, and how this works basically is, first of all, we need to change this to be piano prefs, right? So we'll copy that and say that all instances of this text should be that. And we can always change that easily later on if so desired. And we're going to need to swap that for this. Incidentally, one of the, maybe we'll actually even use the same quotes that were there before. inadvertently, the syntax for the piano and the name of the package are the same. So the package settings are actually the syntax specific settings at the current time. So that's something that will probably need to be tweaked at some point in the future. It still works just fine, but can be a little bit weird. And now we're going to go to piano.sublime settings. So if we went to, whoops, stop that. The settings are those. Now I'm going to add in here rulers. Whoops. Rulers. This doesn't have anything to do with the change that I'm making, but I don't like having the rulers in my display there. Draw white space selection is definitely something that was in these settings, I believe, as well as those ones. Hmm. Maybe I am incorrect. Maybe this is actually something different. Let's see. We can say, whoops, don't do that. What was the other thing I wanted to change real quick? Something I noticed before. Oh, yeah, I see. Settings get font size is 11. So we want to add that in here as well. Whoops, no, font size, thank you. So if I made that, that's this, really? Hmm. Pref syntax specific. Oh, sorry, piano.sublime. This is my version of this. My bad. I'm putting these things in entirely the wrong place. Whoops, whoops. Okay. Right. Makes the sense. Okay. Thus. There. So if I set that to that, that should theoretically bump the font size, except that I did that. So I set a view specific setting, so I need to erase it in order to put that one back in place. And then if I set that to 11, it'll go the way we want. A hidden color scheme. The question there was, what's a hidden color scheme? A hidden color scheme is one that Sublime still treats it as a color scheme, but if you go to the preferences color scheme item, it doesn't. It doesn't appear in that list, which is everything to do with if you look in the UI.py file and look for select color scheme. In the thing where it selects all of the color schemes to pick, you'll notice that it only finds Sublime color scheme files and then files from the legacy thing. Oh, it also finds TM theme files as well, but it specifically doesn't look for hidden Sublime color schemes. So that's a file format that will work, but doesn't appear in the menu. There's also, you can do the same thing with syntax definitions as well, so that you can apply them, but they don't appear down here. For example, if we look here, I would imagine right now it's not hidden, but probably you might want it to be. There are syntaxes in override audit that way. For example, there's syntax definitions for package reports and diff reports and stuff, but notice they don't appear in this list because it's not the sort of file that you'd normally be editing on yourself, or by yourself, I should say. These are the settings that are for this. So I think we wouldn't modify, we're not working with any of those. These are the settings to override both user and default settings for the piano syntax. I think this, if I am correct. Oh, and sorry, is that why that was all angry? Piano prefs is used prior to global. Oh, sorry. Gotta do that too, I suppose. Okay, now it's broken somewhere else, but that is okay. What was I looking for there? This. This is one of those things where there is actually a default value applied for this, but it's different than the one that's in the settings file, which is bizarre. But we're going to work on that in just a second. So coming back to this, in plugin loaded, this is, remember when Sublime loads a plugin, it's going to load this entire file first, then it finds all of the commands and sets them up, as known command classes, and all the event listeners, it finds those for those as well. And then once everything is loaded and everything's ready to go, then it calls the plugin loaded to let everything know that the API is now available and ready. So by the time this is called, this will have already compiled this piano prefs function, and functions in Python can have arbitrary properties. So here we're saying that the obj property is the actual settings object, because remember, once you call load settings, anytime anybody else calls load settings for the same thing, you're just going to get the same settings object back, or a settings object that wraps the same settings data anyway. So there's no reason to do that. And we can also have this one, which is going to be the default values for settings that we might be getting here. So for the time being, I'm going to throw that in, and we're going to use the one from the settings file, which is currently set to string, like so. And all the other ones for now, we're going to remove from here. So what we have now is, yeah, I know that's broken. Piano prefs obj is the settings object, and the default property on it is that. We don't call this because we just set it, and we don't have to call piano prefs.get. We just call input name. Now this would be an example of a place where we would say that well, maybe we'll put these at the top. The weird. Input name is none, and the output name is none. This is setting, if you were to call this function to obtain the value of a setting and it doesn't appear in the settings file, what should the returned value be? And the default value for that's going to be none anyway. But now, instead of saying piano prefs.get input name none, we can just say piano prefs, and it's going to do that. And we don't want to pass this because we're going to modify this function in just a second. And I know it doesn't have a thing there. Hang on, I'm getting to it. We're going to look for piano prefs. That's that one. And this is another example of what we would be doing here. So we're going to do that. And this goes away. This is going to be input name and output name, which is the same as the ones up here, but get available port names gets called with a port type of that's a string that's either the word in or out, specifying whether you're specifying the input MIDI port or the output MIDI port, right? So that is just easily coming up with the appropriate settings name without having to say input name if port type equals in, else output name, which does the same thing but is a lot longer in the screen. Next, that is not finding what it should be finding. It should be finding this one. Thank you very much. But we need to go back. Thank you. Now, this is calling the set version of this. So what we're actually going to do is this. And because it's calling, so what we're going to do is make our function so that if you call it with the first argument, that's the name of the setting. If you don't specify a second argument, the value is retrieved. Otherwise, it is a set in there. And we're going to cut that for the time being. The next item is this one. And here we can just say piano prefs program. We don't need to specify none because that's going to be the default value, but we should jump up here and add program as this. This also, I find, and this is just me, tends to let me know when I'm working with settings that these are the settings that I expect to appear throughout my code. Which otherwise would be decoupled and only appear in the settings file itself, which is nice. But if you just want to search around in your code to see where you're doing stuff, it's nice to know what you thought the default value was. That's just me. Everybody, does their own thing. I'm going to paste that in there and comment it out for the time being. So we can say that one is getting and it's fine. And that one is getting and it's fine. That one's getting and it's fine. That one is setting. So for this one, we would call this, and we don't need to call this because the other thing is going to do it. Anytime we apply a setting, we save the settings file. That seems like the way to go for something like that. And now we are getting, so we can remove the dot get. And again, we don't need that argument. That will do something that we don't want it to. Resetting the output port. And again, that is, resetting the port. This is doing the same thing as the other one, coming up with other input port or output port. It's actually name in this case. So we should probably do something about that as well. Let's go ahead and go here. So program is something that we have already seen. And program is something that we have already seen. And here we're getting scope to highlight, and the default value here is region.reddish. That's not actually the default that we're using. The default that we're actually, well, that's the default we're using here, but that's not what's in the settings file. So that's why that appears that way. But if that setting didn't appear, it would be red. That's how it used to be previously. Did that make a noise? No, because I probably broke something because the plugin is broken. Right, right. That makes good sense. We're going to get that. Now that automatically makes that look a little bit shorter as well, which is nice. Now we definitely don't need that because it's not a global anymore. Yeah, input name, output name. Right. Those are good. Import and output port work the same sort of way in some of the code. Those represent these actual global objects here. Another one of those modifications we want to do at some point. Now we can save that. Now we can say if new value is not none, then we want piano, oh, sorry, we want piano prefs dot obj dot set key new value and this. And we'll actually return that value. Otherwise, we'll fall through to doing this. Oops. So when you call this function, you can call it, you always have to specify the name of the settings key that you're interested in, and then you specify a new value if you want to set one. So if you don't provide one, then this doesn't trigger. And what it does is look up what the default value for that should be, which again is specifying none here explicitly, even though it doesn't have to, because it's nice to be explicit about that sort of thing when you're talking to the API directly. And that is the default value that will be used in the call to actually get it from the settings object. So the settings hierarchy would be the value that's actually set in the settings by the user, then the settings that are set in our settings file, and then if for some reason that wasn't available, the one that's specified up at the top right here. And then if that's not available, then the default will be none. On the other hand, if you call this with two things, the settings key and a new value, then we will set the new value in and save the settings file to persist it. This does mean that you can't set the value of a setting to none using this, which I don't think is necessarily a problem. If it is, it's easy enough to fix in the future. So that's probably nothing to be worried about right now. But now that I save that, that seems to be working nicely. So it's still able to get settings and it's loading them in because you'll note if I was to do program change, say to say a saxophone. Now if I quit and then restart, the whole plugin is going to reload. It should be getting everything from settings. We don't see any errors down there. We do see it saying using that mini input, and that is because we told it in the last stream that that's the input I wanted, but that's not currently working because I don't have that thing plugged in right now. So that's why it's saying that, but the MIDI output is that one, and we still get the saxophone because it loaded the that particular item. So I think that is what we said we wanted to do here. Instead of a settings object, be a function you can call. Defaults are baked in case the preferences file goes missing. And this needs to be able to set a setting as well. So the optional second argument is the value to use to change the setting. This assumes no settings erase. And that's because the other Excuse me. The other thing you could do is assume that if you're trying to set a value to none, what you're actually trying to do is remove it from the settings file, um, which is not something that this can do right now, but I don't necessarily think that that's something that we would want to do anyway. Certainly, we didn't run into it in any of the existing code there. So I think that is step one done here, and we can see the changes that I made here. We can even hide that up so we can see I removed the piano prefs global and replaced it with a function object that loads the settings, and, or sorry, a function object with a property that has the settings object that used to be loaded there and has some defaults baked in. There's the new function. If the new value isn't none, that means you're trying to set the settings. So call set on the settings object, then save the settings with the same name that was used to load it. Otherwise, get the default from the baked in defaults, defaulting to none if that is not there, and ask the settings object for the value of the setting, returning it back. And now when we get anywhere where it's get, we don't have to specify the dot get. We just say we want the preference for the input port or the output port. And we don't need to do this. If we're setting it, we just say the piano preference for input port or output port name is this. We don't need to call save because that's automatically happening. That's making that a little bit nicer. Get is that one. This set and save is now just a call to the one method. This is also a call to the one method, like so. Get one method, and this one is that. So what we might actually do is scope to highlight current piano note tune. What we might do is say in the code, this was region.reddish. But in the settings file, it's string, which is the one we want. Just so that we know, this is one of the things we're doing as we're working on this. We're throwing to-do comments in here to remind ourselves of future steps that we might want to look into, and we can make a determination on that, and then it's as easy as fixing it or removing that particular thing. So that's the only thing we changed there. So I can stage this, and then we can say refactor settings object. And is usually the case on streams, we're going to, I'm just going to put in simple commit messages, and I can always cycle back and edit them with something more explicit when the time comes. Now, the next thing in this list is add a new setting for the default piano, which sets the base name of the file to use. This goes back to what I said at the beginning of the stream. Right now, there is one piano file named piano ASCII right here, which is this content in the top of this panel up here is actually just a text file that has syntax highlighting applied to it. And Keith is the syntax king, so that's how that works. And we want there to be potentially more than one of these, and what we're going to be doing soon is modifying code to not assume what the name of this is. So we want a setting to be applied for this, and that's why we updated the settings object thing first, because now we're going to be applying more settings to this thing. This is an unfortunate bit of business because this is, as I said, the package name and the syntax name are the same, so it's accidentally storing its own settings inside of its syntax-specific settings. So we're going to want to set a name for this. Now there's actually, the base name to use for the piano, we're going to assume that the thing is always going to be inside of piano data in this particular case. So we'll move the existing file into piano data, and then we're not going to tell anybody that they need to put the .text onto the end of the thing, or we're not going to make them specify the name of the actual thing. We're just going to say we want piano or something along those lines, and then code that we're going to be working on in the next few minutes is going to do something with that. And right now there's only one of these. And this is actually it here. We can see if I was to call reveal in sidebar, there it is. So let's go ahead and move this into the data folder like so. Yes, move here. And now we need to do something like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Actually, Let's call this piano 7 octaves because there's 7 octaves of range on this thing. Normal piano has 88 keys. That's not this many. So we might also rename this file to be piano 7 oct. Piano 7 octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, those are easily numbered. Right on. We're going to go ahead and do that. And just for the sake of completeness, what we also want to do is call piano. What was this thing called a second ago again? I've already forgotten. That is how quickly that goes. It used to be called piano ASCII, pardon me. There's one other thing in here that references it. Well, a couple of those actually. This one packages piano data slash piano. Well, actually, 7 octave. This is something we're going to be revisiting in a minute, but I want to make sure everything continues to work. One of the things I like to do when I am working on something is follow the Git mantra of commit early, commit often. If I can make a commit to the repository, then I know that when I look at changes, it's exactly related to something that I've changed but haven't tested yet. So I like to do that. So I like to build up a commit, and I don't like to create a commit where things will break if someone happens to be using that version, been burned by that far too many times. This is going to need to potentially change. I'm going to modify it. Do we want to modify it anyway? I don't think we do, because we're going to. I'm going to leave, well, no, actually, I guess we should, just because. 7 octave. We'll go ahead and tweak that up in a minute. This is what's telling Sublime to automatically apply this syntax when this file is opened. And yes, even though it says file extensions, it will match on whole file names. Basically, what it's doing is something equivalent to Python's string dot ends with. If it ends with this, then you know that then it knows that that's the thing. So normally you'd put text in there. Text files end in text. You see something like this happen in the makefile syntax because makefiles don't generally have an extension. They're just a file named makefile. So the extension in those is makefile. So there is default package coverage for something like that. And this here, piano plugin in find piano, which is something we're going to need to work on too. This should be piano 7 octave, like so, and it will be in the data directory. This is it finding the actual piano. Weirdly, oh, I see. It returns the view event listener for this. It doesn't necessarily need the view, but it needs this to be able to do it. So this is a function that's implicitly returning none because it falls off the bottom. If piano is none, this doesn't trigger. It falls off the bottom. Python functions inherently return none in that case. That's a functionality that's used in a lot of interpreted languages because it's easier to write the interpreter to assume that the thing on the top of the stack at the end is the return value, and then you don't have to try to enforce that there actually is one, which makes life a little bit easier. Although it can hurt readability in some cases. I think that's why TypeScript. Well, TypeScript doesn't specifically enforce that, but a lot of linters enforce the you should return a value here. Actually, I think TypeScript might enforce that by default. To be honest, I've fought linter type operations at work for so long, I've kind of forgotten. Okay, so with all of those changes made, this is going to be another one of those cases we're going to quit and we're going to restart. So we want to make sure that we're working from a known state. I'm going to close this. So what I should be able to do is say show piano, and the piano should appear, and it still has the syntax highlighting. I should still be able to play. That still works, and I should be able to also say play tune. That's still finding things properly. So that part all works. The syntax was on there. So let's go ahead and vet what we have here. We changed piano ASCII to data piano 7 octave. That sounds good. We changed piano ASCII to piano 7 octave. Doesn't care what folder it's in. It only cares about the name. That's good. This file, which as we can see is a text file, and when it is squinched down, there's nothing too exciting about it. That it has been deleted. So let's go ahead and stage that deletion. In the plugin code here, we're expanding variables to expand the packages and package name folder. Oh, sorry, it updated variables with the name of the actual package so that it can throw it into data piano 7 octave. That sounds like something we did. Piano becomes piano data 7 octave. That is that thing. And there's one untracked file, which is this one. And if we were to stage that, then we might notice that this is actually an unchanged content of a file whose name very slightly changed. So with that the case, what was the actual thing that we're doing here? We don't need that window currently. No sir, we don't. We were saying this needs to be add setting to control piano used is what we're doing here. And as we're doing this as a part of this change, we can go ahead and commit that. So now that that is done, we can close that. We need to actually cycle through and use that in all of the places. So we're going to do what? We're going to need, we don't care about the syntax per se at this point because there's only going to be one of these things. And we're going to say piano layout, is going to be equal to not that. Did I actually store that anywhere? No, I didn't, did I? Okay, well, I mean, I could type it, but I think it's safer to do that. And in this setting, we're going to assume this, just the name of the file. As a matter of fact, we're not even going to have an extension on this. The layout that we want is the piano 7 octave. And we're going to copy that and save it. And we're going to jump over to the plugin because we have added a new setting. So that should twig us that, up at the top of this file. That's the key I meant to press. There's a little something I got to do with my keyboard layout. We'll add it here. There is a new item for that, which is piano layout. So now we have added a setting with a default value. So that was easy. And we will go ahead and say, what did we add? We added a new setting and we added a new setting. So we'll stage both of those and then we will amend the previous commit because they're actually part of one thing. But because I'm doing this piecemeal, I know I can verify the changes that I've just made, and I'm pretty happy with the other ones. I'm not actually doing anything with this one yet, so I don't really need to test that the setting that I'm not asking for is still being loaded. Now, the next phase of this operation would be this. Now we've added the setting, and what we still need to do is actually make it use this thing. Which just seems like, good sense at this point. Because remember, we want each one of these commits to be something that still works. And the idea of this commit is the file that's used is controlled by the setting. So it should probably be controlled by the setting. So I'm going to save that. Now, if we were to look for the piano 7 octave like so, then what we could actually do in this one is say variables.update. All right, that's not normally the style I would do something like that with, but I will go with it. Piano layout, and piano layout would be the, let's see, what's the name of the thing? Piano prefs, getting the value of piano layout. And we know that's going to return some sort of value, even if it's not in the settings, because our code is doing it, so that makes this part nicer. And now we can replace this with $piano layout, like so. That's one thing that has compiled, still works. Jump down. That is the only place that that appears here. Where it doesn't appear is here. And for the time being, we're going to leave this alone because one of the things we're doing in just a second is replacing this thing. So we can only do so much here, if you will. But I want to keep this as tight as possible for things. And in order to do this in one commit, I'd also have to implement this part too, which is more involved. So if we come back to here, the only change that's in place now that wasn't before is we're now calling variables update for piano layout and then uh, expanding an extra variable. So instead of knowing piano 7 octave, it's pulling it from there, which for our purposes, testing wise, is easy enough to test because if I did the play tune, it's playing it and it still managed to find the appropriate thing. So that is doing what we want. So that is good. So I'm going to go ahead and stage that and amend that commit. And we are now done with, whoops, press the right key, that one. We added a new setting for the default piano, which is the base name of the file. Path of the specific folder inside the package itself is inferred. We don't want anybody to have to specify that. It's nicer to be able to just say that the piano I want to use is the piano 7 octave layout as opposed to the piano 2 octave layout or 3 octave layout or piano split octave or whatever you might want to have. If you want to have a couple for the left hand and a couple for the right hand and actually see them visibly different, it should be something that we're allowed to do. Maybe we can even throw a sideways guitar neck in this thing. This is, we're in charge of our own domain here. So that part's all done. So next is where we're starting to get the interesting stuff here. Create a new function, get piano view. Now what this is going to do is scan over all of the windows. Now, what we actually want to do here, remember, is we want there to be exactly one piano. So, right now we're using this show piano command, which is using the open file command. The open file command will open a file if it doesn't exist and focus the existing one if it does. But see if we do, whoops, if I was down here and said, push the right thing and say show piano, it's focusing up there into the piano view. We can see the cursor right there because that's what it do. But if we were in a new window and I said show piano, now there's two of them. And now the code that wants to find the piano for the purposes of updating the keys when things are playing is going to get a little bit unhappy about it or potentially do the wrong thing. Because we'll even see what happens here. If I said play tune, found that. It doesn't work in this one. It only works in the first one that it found, right? Which happens to be associated with the window that it was originally in based on the way this works. So, yeah, okay, we can stop that now. Thank you. So yeah, there we go. We want there to be exactly one of these at all times, no matter what. No matter how many windows, there should be one. So this command shouldn't just open the file if it doesn't already exist. It should find the existing one wherever it is and raise that window to the top and focus it, because if you want to show the piano, here it is. If there's not a piano, it should open the piano. And you should also be able to specify what piano you want to be able to open. And there's a default, which is that setting that we just implemented. That's why we're going through these steps in this order. So what we're going to do is create a function which will scan over all windows to find the piano view. There can be only one, just like the Highlander, and that would be returned back. And if there isn't one, we would potentially return none. Now, there's a few arguments that we're going to specify in here, which is if there's not already a piano, should I create one? That allows code that wants to find the piano and make for sure there definitely is one, like the thing that would be playing it back or the show piano command. It can force that if it wants to. If code wants to be able to get at the view so that it can just update the display, but it doesn't necessarily need to update the display. For example, the MIDI file playing code that I implemented, which just plays in the background. And if the piano is focused, it will show you it playing, but it doesn't necessarily have to do that. Then we have the ability to get the view and say, you know what, if there's not one, you don't have to create one. I'm fine with that. We'll worry about that later. We also want an argument for should the view be focused or not, which means when I call this, if there is a view, do I want it to have the focus, or do I just want to get the view so that I could do something with it or to it or related to it, but I don't necessarily need it to have the actual focus, because what that one's going to do is if you say yes, it's going to find the view, and if that one's not that window is not currently in focus, it'll raise that window up, which I think should be possible based on new API that became available recently. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And lastly, we're going to be able to say that when you do this, you're going to specify what piano should be displayed. If there's not already a piano, it will load that one. And if there already is a piano, it'll swap the piano that's already in use with the one that you give. So the idea behind that is if there's more than one piano, remember the plan is there should be more than one different kind. Right now there's only one. Then there should be able to have we should be able to have multiple entries in the command palette for each of them, and then have that command automatically be able to flip it. And we don't need to create a new view if there's already one. We just need to change what's inside of it. So that is the stuff we're going to work on next. And we'll see how well this goes. How are we doing on time here? We've been an hour so far. This is going on not too shabbily. Now there's to some degree kind of some code like this already in here. And where should we put this? This is related to starting and shutting down the plugin, getting its preferences. These are also related to preferences. This is MIDI and MIDI and MIDI related. So maybe we put the display items after the MIDI specific code, or do we put them before? Let's say after. So we go right here. So we're going to need that, and we're going to need a few different arguments here. Create, if not found. Oops, stop doing that. I mean to be doing that. Create equals false, let's say. Is that what I said I wanted the default for this to be? Defaults to false. If true, there's no view found, one will be created. Okay. Next, the item in the list is focus the view. So we want to say focus equals false, which defaults to false. If true, the view will be given the focus, including raising the window, but only if we actually have one, right? And lastly, specify the piano file to use, which we can say piano. What's the name of that actual setting? Piano layout equals none. And when this is none, it's going to come from the settings. So that is what we want to implement. And this is an example of something where I'm going to say the following. Find, and this is, basically I want to clear in my head exactly how all these arguments are going to interplay with each other, which I've thought of before, and I kind of wrote down in the outline, but not specifically here. So find and return the piano view, if any. If there's not a view, but create is true, then this will create the view. If a view would be returned and focus is true, this will ensure that the view has the focus, even if it has to raise the window to do it. When creating a piano layout specifies the file to load. If there is a view, and piano layout is given, then the layout is swapped to the new one prior to return. thus. Okay, so what we're going to need to do here, and this is why I mentioned when we were looking at the syntax, um, right now the syntax is being set by the extension of the file itself, or the extension, but really the name of the file. This is, because it's using open file, just a regular view. So I can type in this if I want to, unless one of these keys has the focus, in which case typing plays a note if possible. We want this view to be read-only so that that doesn't happen, this part here. And the reason that this key binding is working is because it's using a context to specify the scope at the cursor location, which is why it plays here, but it doesn't play here, it types. So if we had a setting in this view, we could use that in the key context, and that will make that easier. And we also want this to be read-only, and we want it to be the tab to be named piano and not the name of the actual file or something along those lines. Maybe later we can modify it to say piano colon 7 octave or something if we cared. So what we're going to say right now, we want the tab to be named piano, and we want to be able to find it if it exists. So what we need to do is actually find the view, right? And because we want there to be only one of these, then we need to iterate over all the windows. So we can say for window in sublime.windows, do this. And then for view in window.views, do this. We're going to find ourselves a view. And if we get down here, we're going to say return none because we didn't find anything. Now, what we actually want to do is test the name of the view that we're looking for to see if it is a piano. Seems like the way to go. So maybe I can even do something like this. View dot set name, like so. And is that actually visible in here? Yay, it totally is. Right on. Uh, Incidentally, I don't think I actually mentioned this, but when after I wanted to do it before, but after on the same day of rather, but later in the day. So after the first video in the package and plugin development series, Plugin 101 appeared on the channel last week, I pushed out a new version of HyperHelp with some additional slight changes, some extra changes to Snappy as well, and some changes to HyperHelp Author because we're going to be using them in the course. And one of them is making links float to the top when you follow them. But there's the settings so that you can keep the old default value if you want to do something like that. And you can use the HyperHelp settings to be able to get at that. We can see we can set a name for a view. We can also get the name of a view as well. View.name. That one returns the name, if any. So we're going to say this. If view.name is equal to piano, then we want to proceed. Otherwise, we don't want to proceed, right? We can go ahead and throw that out now. Now, this is us actually finding the appropriate view. So that is, excuse me, the step we want to follow here is finding the actual view. So we might say the variable here called piano view equals none. And I think we should be able to say break here. Oh, well, actually, we probably want to say piano view equals view, and then break. So once we fall out of that loop, we've found the view that represents the piano, and we've looked through every window that exists in order to find the thing. And we're checking for a tab specifically named piano. Now, if piano is none and create, then we actually want to create the piano, right? Create the piano here. And we'll go ahead and throw that in because I imagine that is necessary. Let's zoom that up a little bit. So we looked for the piano. If there wasn't one, but we were asked to create one, then this code is going to be responsible for creating that piano. Then we're going to fall down to here, and we're going to say if piano view is not none. And this is one of those, this is a style thing, I think. You could just say if not piano and create. Um, is that clearer than if piano is none and create? Do we want to use is instead of implying that none is a Boolean false? I This is one of those things I struggle with because I'm fairly new to Python development. I've only been doing it since 2016 because that's when I discovered Sublime, and it was the thing that made me say, okay, I'll learn Python. So I've never taken any actual course in this. I've just I know enough languages that I picked up the syntax. What's the Pythonic way to do that? So this may be something that needs to be adjusted later. But if we say if the piano was none and we were asked to create one, then create the piano here. If the piano view is not none and focus, then focus the piano view here because we actually have a piano view and we were asked to focus it. And lastly, we might say if, what do we want to actually say here? We want piano layout, change layout of existing view is what we actually want to do here. And we want to do this after that, I would suppose. It doesn't really matter, does it? Actually, that should be piano view, pardon me. If piano view is none and create the piano view here. We could actually say, we'll do this one first. If piano view is not none and piano layout is not none. I don't, now that I'm looking at it, I don't like that. So let's say if piano view and piano layout, then there is an existing view, but change its layout, maybe. If not, we can say if not piano view, there is no view, so create one. And if piano view and focus, there's a view if we were asked to focus it. This should be more or less what we want to do here. And then when we get to the end, we can return piano view, which is going to be either the view itself or none, right? That seems pretty straightforward. Possibly this double nested for loop could be tightened in some way. I don't think so, but you never know. I'm not a Python guru. Seems like the sort of thing that might require something like that, though. What do we got over here? Nothing exciting. Cool. So let's go through this one at a time. And this is, there is no view, so create one. So we're going to say window is equal to sublime.activeWindow because we want a new window. And then we want to say piano view is equal to, excuse me, window.new file. And we're going to go do this. And we can actually pass a syntax in this thing. Whoops, don't do that, my friend. We're going to say syntax is equal to, and we're going to hard code this for a second, like I did last time, but I'm going to try to remember to not do that this time. We want the syntax to be packages, piano. It is not that, and it's not that. Yeah, it's in the top level, right? Yeah. That's the color scheme, so just piano.sublime syntax, right on. That's what I thought. I tend to put those sorts of things in a resources folder in my own packages. Don't say that. Piano.sublime syntax would be the syntax for the view that we're creating. And because we're doing that, we no longer need this. Theoretically. I think for now, because we only have one layout, I think it makes sense to do that because then we can rename the file with impunity and this will still work. If we ever decided that there needed to be a layout that uses a different syntax than this, then we would need to maybe revisit this and have different syntaxes with different extensions or map them internally somehow. So I'm going to go ahead and redact that for the time being and do this. And we will, oops, that's not what I meant to do. Pardon me. I'm going to do that so we can zoom this out a little bit. So we have now created that. We have created the view. We want to say piano view dot set scratch true because we don't want what we're about to do to make the tab ever look like it needs to be modified. And we're going to say piano view dot set read only to true because we don't want anybody to be able to type into the thing. And I'm going to save that. Now, if I was to say from piano plugin import, the name of this thing I've already forgotten, which is piano layout. I don't think that's what I meant that to be called. Let's fix that. Get piano view. That was dumb. Get piano view. Pardon me. Okay. Import get piano view. So if I called get piano view, we end up with ostensibly none. But if I said create equals true, we have a view and it is read only and the syntax is set to piano. So that part is doing what we want. We even see the view returned there. So that's a vet that that one's actually working. And that's a nice way to be able to test things like this, by the way. This Python console, it's a Python console. You can get at the plugin host. You can do more than just invoke window and view commands. You can actually do what your plugin would do, so you can test that it'll actually do what you want. Remember that every time you save the plugin, you have to come back here and do this again because it will be still referencing the version of the function from the last time it loaded the module. References don't automatically update, or the world would fold in on itself. Now we need to say sublime.find resource. And again, we are going to hard code this for the time being. I think we want to do that. Packages piano, just to double check. Sublime.find resource. I actually don't want to call find. I want to load the resource. Pardon me. But yeah, I think that we would do it that way. Packages piano data and then the name of the file dot text, and then we can mod that with the piano prefs for piano layout. That's going to load the resource. Layout equals, and then we can say piano view dot run command append. I think one of the things that we need to tweak in this thing is deciding once and for all whether it's going to be single quotes or double quotes, you know? I keep flip-flopping back and forth between those, and I think Keith tends to use the other kind, so I should probably try to follow suit with that, I would imagine. We're going to run this, and we need to pass some arguments here, which are the characters of layout and force of true. We don't want to scroll to the end, and sure. Incidentally, force and disable tab translation are things that are new to Sublime Text version 4. Sublime 3 has an append command that takes a characters argument, but it doesn't have a force on it. forces the append to happen even if the view is read only. Otherwise, it wouldn't do anything. And disable tab translation. Make sure that if you insert a physical tab, it gets inserted as a physical tab, even if the setting for converting tabs to spaces is enabled. Basically, it's a way of saying, see this text I have, cram it onto this buffer, and don't do anything with it. Just put this actual text in the buffer. So we're going to do that. And that, I think, should be enough for this command, show piano, to actually show us the actual view. Assuming I did it correctly, which apparently I did not. Oh, actually, because it's not actually a thing yet, right? All right. I suppose if we're getting all that about it, then yeah, I guess we actually need to call the function to see if it's doing anything, right? There is a tab. Why is it named Untitled? Oh, I didn't actually set the name. Pardon me. Oops. Like so. Which works the same as this one because it's syntax based. It's not necessarily view based. But I can't type in this. But up here, it works. So we're getting close to what we want. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So we have to remember what it is that we wanted to do with this. We're going to get the active window. We're going to create the new file. We're going to and do that. Now we're going to do a couple of things here. And piano view dot settings dot set is piano to true. That changing double to single quotes looks handy. That's actually not a key binding. I'm just doing that manually, as a matter of fact. It's sort of a tricky consequence because it's easy enough to select them, and then if you decide, oh, I want these to be double quotes, you can push the key, but then it'll wrap the selection, so you have to backspace and do it. It should be easy enough to create a key binding to do something like that, but I tend to do it fairly infrequently. Actually, I think there's actually a package that does something like that. I think it just sort of scans through the whole file and does it for you. I'm not entirely sure. You could do it as a scope-based thing because punctuation definition string begin and punctuation definition string end are things that, you know, good syntax, well, not good syntaxes, but the beefier syntaxes have, and you can also tell that it's string quoted single. So you could find all of the start and end punctuations in single quoted strings and then be able to replace them all in one shot in a plugin. That'd be a handy tutorial to show to someone on a channel, probably. The other thing I wanted to do here is say piano view dot set name piano. Remember, because that's the name we're using up here, so we have to make sure the thing actually has that name. We set it to scratch, set it to read only, set the is piano true in there. Then we load the resource, cram it in, and that's pretty much all we need to do for that. So if I was to re-import that and say we want to get the piano view and don't call create, we get none. If I call create equals true, then we get the object appearing. It actually has a name of piano, which is what we want. And that part's still working. It's still read only. Now, probably what I should have done is something a little different there because let's do it this way. If I close this tab and we can say that's going to create the view and ask for its ID, we get a view with ID 80, right? Now, if we call it again, because there's already a view, this shouldn't happen. So the return value should still be 80 because it found the existing view. And it is. And similarly, if we did this, it should also return 80 because it's going to find the existing view. And it does. So that part is working good. So we have, if there's not a piano view and we were asked to create one, please do so. Now, this part actually needs a little bit of tweakage. And I think it's a good idea, now that I think of it, to do this up here, indeed. Because what we want to do here is get the active window, create a file with the appropriate syntax, and this shouldn't be hard coding the name of the package, so we need to do something about that. This is getting the piano layout from the setting, which is what we want. Oh, one other thing we need to tweak here before I continue with that. Actually, no, let's go ahead and say this. We'll say piano layout equals piano layout or piano prefs for piano layout. So if you were to call this with a value, then that value will be none and it'll end up being set. But if you don't pass the value, then it's none, then it ends up being the value of the preference. And then this will just be piano layout, like so. Can you invoke multiple cursor in the piano view and press several keys at once? That's a good question. Uh, I don't know that it'll necessarily play several keys at once. I think not, because it's actually using a command that triggers whenever you try to insert any character. But what it does have, and is something that we're going to be able to fix in just a second, um, if the cursor's up here in the keys, then when I push one, it plays. What it plays is dependent on the key that you press on the keyboard and not where the cursor is, but it only triggers if the cursor is inside of one of those keys. So down here it doesn't. In fact, I can type into there. But if we were to look at the key map, we can see what it's doing here, and it's bound to the key character inside of the angle brackets. This is something that will make Sublime invoke your command for anything that would have inserted a character into the buffer. So any uppercase character, lowercase character, number, punctuation, anything where when you press the key, something gets inserted directly, not like a snippet, but an actual insertion. This command will get invoked with that. It will get called for that key, and it will get as an argument named character that is what the key actually was. So what this command is actually doing is capturing anytime you press the key, it's calling play piano note from PC keyboard and giving it the key that you pressed, and then the plugin code knows that B is a C note in octave 4 or what have you. And it's doing that currently by knowing that the end of the line that the cursor is on is piano instrument dot piano, which is all of these lines up here, but not these lines. This is after piano because this is the other parts. And similarly there, that's why I can type in here and I can type in here, but here, well, that's a bad key. The K key plays that, but here it inserts and here it inserts. But now we don't have to do that anymore. We can say that the setting.isPiano is, actually, we don't even need any of this business because the default operator is equals and the default operand is true. So we only have to do if settings.isPiano. We don't need this one at all, which means this one doesn't work for pressing keys anymore because that's one that we haven't set up this way. But this one will, in theory. Oh, I guess if I did this and actually called the new function so that that setting was actually set, then it should. Is that not what I called that setting? Let me double check. Settings.set is piano true. Well, that really looks like what I pressed. Oh, should that be setting.isPiano? Yeah, okay. Syntax highlighting gets you every time. Okay. Now when I do it, If I'm down here, K still plays, and I'm not typing. No matter where I am, that is still working, which is exactly what we want to have happen there. So I'm going to close this thing now and say show piano. Whoa, that is weird. Oh, right, because it's opening the actual file now. Right. Again, outsmarting myself by knowing that this function is eventually going to be used in place of a new command, but I haven't actually implemented it yet. So stop trying to do it. It's not going to work. Okay, but that is now doing now. We don't need that anymore because that part's done. So now we have this. If you call this function, it's going to try to find a view across all windows named piano, and then it's going to set that up. And if there's not one and we were asked to create it, then it creates that by assigning it, and then eventually it returns it. That's the first part of what we want this to be able to do. The next part we're going to be able to do, is this. If piano view and focus, then if there's a view, if we were asked to focus it. So what we want to say is piano view dot window dot something that I'm not entirely sure offhand what it is because it was added recently and I'm not sure if it's in that change log. So what we will do is jump into here and go to let's see, local Sublime Text, and then we want lib Python 38, and let's see, that's going to be, what was it that I was looking for again? Something in the plugin in the window class, so that's going to be sublime.py, like so. And if we look for the window class, there should be a method in here named like raise or something. This is relatively new. Bring to front, that's the thing. We want to make sure that the window is brought to front, and then we call focus view. So piano window, bring to front, and then piano view dot, oh wait, it was actually the window that was going to be doing that, wasn't it? Shoot. Focus view, window focus view. Yeah, okay. Close that too soon. Piano.window.focus view, piano view. If there's a window and we were asked to focus it. Okay, actually we might even put that up here. If there's a view and we were asked to do so, focus it. So now if I was to do this, and again we need to make sure we import this, and then we can say get piano view, and we won't say create is true, we just want this to be able to actually go, but we want to be able to say focus equals, we'll say focus equals false for right now, right? I'm going to copy all of that. The focus is in the plugin, that's returning a view, and the focus is still in the plugin. If we did it with focus is true, then we return a view and the focus is now up in the piano. Even though that line is active, the focus, the current is up there. And if we created a whole new window like this and did it here, that still pops to the front. So when you do it, it automatically shows you the thing. Good. If there is not a view and we were asked to create one, do so now. And there we go. So that's those two done. Now the last one is this. If there's a view and we also got a layout, then change it. Now, this is something that I didn't mention in the thing, but what we actually want to do is something different in here. We also want to say piano, view.settings.set piano layout is equal to the layout that we're actually used. So we want to move that up here like so. Maybe we might even go here with that. The layout we want to use is the one that was provided to the function, or if there wasn't one, the one that comes from the preferences file, which will also take it from the user preferences, falling back to our preferences, falling back to the default up at the top of the file. So that will definitely always return something that's non-null or non-none, even if that file doesn't technically exist. We can only protect ourselves from so much. And we're going to set the piano layout to this, like so. And the reason for that is so that we can say if piano view dot settings dot get for piano layout is not equal to piano layout, print changing the layout to something else. Else print, whoops, let's do that. The layout is already set to that. Okay, now we don't need those anymore. And that is saved. So if I did this, we don't necessarily need focus. We don't need create. We know there's definitely a view already, and we tested those. We can say piano layout equals Bob. Then it's changing the layout to something else. But if the layout was piano 7 octave, then the layout is already set to that. This is so that if you were to call this function and say, I want the layout to be something, and the layout's already that, there's no reason to do any work and change it because it's already the right thing, right? Now, this is where we may need to do a slight amount of refactor here because we already have something that is getting this and cramming the data in. Unfortunately for us, this is going to require us to do some extra work. So we might say something like this: def set piano layout for piano view layout, like so. We're going to assume when you pass this that you have a view and you want to be able to set it. So we're going to leave that alone. We are going to copy those out, I think, and fix their indent. Maybe we won't do this one. Set scratch is definitely going to be something that we always need. So we're going to leave that one there, like so. We have the syntax, we have the name, we have set scratch. But what we want this to be able to do is copy that and then that. And this one's going to need to be false. Setting it to false when it's already false is no big deal. Now, I guess we still want those to be in there. Those are not going to change. So we're going to try this, which is something that we're going to have to tweak. I don't know what the good thing to do if the layout you provide isn't actually valid, though. I assume nothing. So maybe this returns a Boolean that indicates whether or not it actually did something. I can't remember offhand what that does. So we will, yeah, we can leave that there. What we actually want to do is say piano view dot run command select all and piano view dot run command left delete, and then we can do this. And in this case, we don't need to say it force to true because it's not read only anymore. And then we will do that. And maybe we might say return true, and here we will return false. We might even say, you know that thing I always do where Status message. Sublime status message is deprecated. Use the one in the window. Okay. So we can go ahead and say, whoa, that is not what I meant to do. Oh, right. I'm using a different layout. We might say piano view.window.status message unable to find piano layout. This might be a case where doing it this way is the better way to go. And then we can say layout and return false. So what's this going to do? Yeah, this is one of those. I wish that there was a clear, but this is something that you could do a little bit easier if if you're running in a text command and you know you're running in a text command because you can just create a region that spans everything and say go away. But otherwise, this is the shortest way that I know to be able to do that. Technically, if you wanted well, not weird, if you wanted indenting and auto indenting to happen, you could select all and run insert. But I believe I have tested and proven that if select all, if there's text selected and you call append, it doesn't replace, it just appends on the end because that's what append does. So that's not technically a safe thing to do. So if we get a piano view and then we set it to read only to false to make sure we can modify it, load the actual layout, which we need to tweak. We'll even add a to do. This should not be hard coded. If I type that now, then when I try to commit this, I'll be like, oh yeah, right, don't do that, Stoopnagel. You replace the text and set it back to read only and then say we're done. Actually, I suppose this part should happen in here, shouldn't it? Even more technically speaking, yeah, I mean, I guess that's okay. Try this. This is really the only part of this that's going to go wrong. Um, if you try to do this and that file doesn't actually exist. So now when we do this, maybe we might want to actually copy that. This is going to load the file and put it into the buffer, but do nothing else, right? So we still need to get the active window. We still need to create the buffer, set its name, set itself to be Scratch. We still need to set these two settings in it because we want this view to be directly, we want this for the code we're updating above, and we want this for the key binding to work, and just so generally code could know without having to examine the name of the buffer or anything. And we don't need to set that. All of this part now becomes a call to that, which we might do something like so. And I guess this would be called piano layout instead. But otherwise, I think that should be, oh, don't do that. That's not the name of the function anymore. That should be okay. And then if piano view settings get is not that, then we would do something else here. We could call this exact same thing, right? We could copy that and paste it here, like so. And that would theoretically do exactly what we want. Now, in order for that to work, what we need to do is open this and save it as, I don't know, like 6 octave, I suppose. And then get rid of the last this many characters, which I guess goes up to there. So probably the easier way to do that would have been this. That. Whoop. Shoot. Whoops. Is that just doing something? Oh. That and that. Does that look like it's about right? That looks like it's about right. Okay, let's save that. I mean, we're not keeping the thing, so it's nice enough to be able to do that. So, zoom that. Well, that doesn't really restore the zoom state, does it? Okay. Oops, not that one. I am having one of those days. And unfortunately for me, I never remapped the key binding for origami that lets you resize the rows because it defaults to the thing that I use or that Sublime uses for some other stuff. This is what we want. So if I did this, we're asking it to get the view, not create it, but set the layout, and it should do effectively nothing, which it did. But if we set this to 6 octave, then we should see it change up there. And hmm, hmm, well, that maybe did not work. Oh, we gotta fiddle the setting too. Right. Okay. Let's just track it so we know that it's actually doing something. Changing the layout to, and then we can say, comma, piano layout. Else print layout is already. Oh, I wanted the space there. Why did I take it out? Piano layout, like so. Zoom that, save it. Now I think we want this to be a here. Bump. Save the layout used for later. Okay. So, let us say, if I did view.settings.get piano layout, it's piano 7 octave. Okay, so if I did this and I wanted to set it to piano layout 6 octave, it says changing the layout to, but it's calling the function. Oh, okay. That was probably saying something in the status bar, wasn't it? Yeah, unable to find piano layout because that's not a valid function. That would have been more obvious. There we go. There, we shortened it up to 6. Still otherwise works though. Or if we do it again, then, oh wait, it says it's changing the layout to 6. Why is that the case? Did that setting not get updated? The setting did not get updated. Maybe I should probably try that. Okay. Changing the layout. Changing the layout. What stupid mistake did I do now? If the setting is not equal to this, so if 7 is not equal to 6, then change it. Otherwise, it's already that. As a part of changing it, one assumes that, oh, I did the same damn thing again. Sheesh. Okay. I'm a fan of Minecraft. I watch a lot of Minecraft videos on YouTube. There's a guy called MC Skizzleman. I highly recommend him. He's pretty entertaining. He does videos with Impulse SV a lot. He's got his own video series that he's doing now called Solo Skiz. As he's playing, whenever he makes a mistake, he has a video clip of himself appear in the corner going, "Adoy." I feel like I should make one of those because that was stupid. Okay. It is changing the layout to piano 6 octave, but it actually already was. So if I do it again, why is it still not working? Why? What am I missing? I think the Dodoy thing still counts, but nevertheless. We got a layout. If the piano views setting for piano layout is not equal to that one, then we need to change it to that one. Otherwise, the layout's already that. So we call this, let's do this. 2 and layout, and we'll actually put it down here where that and that are the same thing. So that ought to be, whoa, weird. Oh. Oh. All right, well, that's a different stupid mistake. Okay, that one, but not that one. That one, not that one, not that one, not that one, that one, and that one, not that one, and that one. Piano layout. Right, don't reuse variables. Stupid. Setting layout to piano 6 octave, and it's already piano 6 octave. It's already piano 6 octave, but now it's 7, and reference before assignment. Oh, right, okay. Changing it to 8, and it says unable to find layout, and the existing layout remains. Swank. Okay. So we don't need that print. We certainly don't need that one or either of those. So I think at this point, this thing does what we want, except for the part where do not hard code this. That's not something we want to be hard coded. No, sir, it's not. Doing good. We're doing good. So we have a function. It finds a view. If you asked it to change the layout and it actually needs to change it, it will do so. If there's not a view and you asked it to create one, it will create one. These are in a specific order. You don't want it to do this one and then do this one because it would, if there wasn't a view and you asked it to create and you also gave it a piano layout, then after creating it, it would immediately jump into here for no good reason. And I mean, we've guarded it so that it won't do anything, but it makes more sense to not do that. So if there is a view and you've told it to change the layout and it's not using that layout, change it. If there's not a view, but you asked it to create one, then it will create one. And if there is a view and you've asked it to focus, then it'll bring it to the focus, even if it has to activate a different window in order to do that very thing. It'll return the view, which will be the piano view or none. If you didn't ask it to create one and there isn't already a window, then none will be returned because none of this stuff will run. And if you ask it to focus, but there isn't a view, it's also not going to focus it. That is the implicit contract, if you will, with that thing. So if we were to jump to this, what did we say? We want scan over all windows to find the piano view. Check. There can be only one. Check. The view would be returned if found, else none. Check. The created view will contain the piano and have the appropriate syntax set. Yes, it does. It is scratch and read only. It definitely is. There should also be a Boolean setting for indicating this is the piano for key contexts. Got that part nailed. Argument to create it. If it's not found, it defaults to false, but if true and there's no view, one will be created. We know that works. Argument to focus the view defaults to false, but if it's true, a view will be given focus, including raising the window. Totally did that. Give it the file to use. If it exists, this will swap the used piano for the one in the new file. Absolutely correctamundo. All of that part works. So the only thing we need to do is check this in and then fix the thing that we're going to do something with a second ago. So the view now has a setting called is piano, so we don't need to test the end of line selector. This command will just always trigger when the piano has the focus, no matter what. So we can stage that change nicely. This syntax doesn't need to track the extension of the file because theoretically there could be more than one of them. Maybe we leave this for the time being. Just because if someone wanted to open the file for editing, they might want it to have the appropriate syntax. so that it looks like something if you just happen to open it normally. Because right now, the way things stand, it's possible for me to go up to the data folder and click that, and it doesn't look quote unquote correct. But if we discarded this and we did the same thing, then it would look correct. So maybe we'll leave that for now, and maybe throw in a to-do item. Um, may technically not be correct if more layouts are added. So maybe we don't want it to be a text file. Maybe we want it to be a .piano file or something. In which case, the code doesn't need to specify the syntax, but it's currently doing so now when it creates the view, which it needs to do because it's not loading this file into the view. It's loading the resource and appending it into the view instead. So we'll leave that as that. So the syntax now has that to do entry. There's one untracked file that is that one. Yeah, we'll leave that for the time being because it's going to make testing better. And now we have a set piano layout, which takes the piano view and the name of something that should be the layout of something which is inferred to be a file name, deletes the content of the buffer if there is any, inserts it in, applies the appropriate setting, gives you a warning, and returns true or false to tell you if it actually did so. More on that in a second, I guess. And get piano view does all that stuff we just laid out. So we'll stage that one as well. And this was create new get piano view method. Well, endpoint, I should say. And we'll commit that. Now, with that done, we don't need this syntax any longer. We can hide the sidebar. We could say if not set piano layout, return none. I'm not sure what the best thing to do here is. I think we'll leave it. We'll add a to-do comment in here. To do. What if the layout is invalid, but we just... what if the layout is invalid here? What should be returned? Because you could envision the idea that if you passed a layout that was broken, then this should return none. So get piano view will return none. But any code that calls this might assume that if you call it with create true, that it will always create a view. So in that case, you have to call it and then also verify that the thing is valid, which doesn't seem cool. It could be one of those situations where you assume that you can only protect a person from themselves so much. So we're going to do that. Let's go ahead and check that in by amending the previous commit. And this was just implementing the actual thing, not doing something with it. So the last thing is those hard codings of things. We need a way to get at a resource name. If we look for __ name, load instruments is getting the package name and using this to be able to find the appropriate thing based on the name of the package as it actually exists. So that if you rename the directory, this still works because right now it's a work in progress. Here, this is doing the same thing to be able to find the piano view by calling find open file, but we're not going to need to do this anymore because we have that method. So we don't care about this one per se. We don't need to look this one up. This is just a temporary thing. And this is the only other one. So this one plus the thing that we just did. So what we might do is copy these up to, and we might say that this one will go way up here because it could be used by dang near anything. And we'll paste that and, well, bring it back a little and say, get, let's say, resource name. Get res name. And we might say res stub is something. And what we're going to do is that, and then we're going to return packages plus package name plus that plus res stub, like so. And we can test that out here. We can say import get res name. So we could say get res name for, let's say, in the data directory instruments.json, and it comes back as packages piano data instruments.json. Or if we wanted the syntax, we could say piano.sublime syntax, and it'll come back as packages piano.sublime syntax. So I think that is a handy way to pull that off. And then all the places we hard coded that thing, it'll look it up this way. We don't have to specify the packages slash, we don't have to specify the package name. Later on, if we decide this should definitely have a particular name, right now it's sort of, because it's not installable by package control per se, it will get installed and you have to manually clone it. So whatever you cloned it as, that's what the package name is. That's why it's doing it this way. Then if we came up with a definitive name, then this could just say packages slash whatever the definitive name is slash and stick the res stub on. It still makes the code nicer to look at because you don't have to specify a big long path name. I do something similar in override audit as well. I have like an OA syntax that you give the syntax stub name and it sticks the rest of the thing on. So if we looked again for this, then for load instruments, we could say that res name is equal to get res name of data slash instruments dot JSON, like so. Then we don't need to pull the package name, and this can just load the resource res name. So we actually don't even need it to have a name, really. We can just pull that, stick it directly in here, like this. And that looks a lot nicer. So if I did, what's this thing called? Program. It has successfully loaded that file still. Next, this one is one that we're not going to need to worry about. And that's the thing we just implemented. So now we need to look at the set piano layout. This one should be something like that, right? But it would be data slash %s dot text. And then we would playing on the piano layout. That's the resource name. Packages piano is inferred slash is inferred data slash the name of the thing. So we can plunk that out and throw this in its place. And now that's not hard coded anymore. And there's one in here too, right? When we set the syntax, which is that. And we definitely don't need that. This just needs to be piano.sublime syntax. Like so. Syntax. Do that, do that. Oops. Drop those lines, and syntax is equal to that. And those are the only ones that we did that, right? Yes. Okay. Now, in order to test this, I think we need to be able to do this. Piano layout is 8 octave, and piano layout is 6 octave. It changed, and we can also stick it back to 7. And just to be able to test this, if there wasn't such a view and we did this, then the piano view should spring into existence. We also said create equals true. And the syntax is set. So that part is all doing what we want. We can come back over to here and say, what did we add? We added res name. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Shoot. All right, let's double check that. Yeah, we definitely don't want to check that in. We added res name. Yes, we did. We removed the hard-coded and changed that to be data and the name of the layout. That one is the syntax name shortened up. That's the instrument name shortened up. So we can amend previous commit because that's part of the thing that we just did. And now, any place where we might want to get the piano view, we can do so. So this is where we would go to find open file, this one. We need piano to be the actual view, right? So right now, what this is doing is extracting all the variables from the window to be able to see what the current file is, getting the package name. I guess does it actually need variables? Yes, it does. It needs this. It's calling this so that it can expand the name packages in here. And then it's also adding in the package name and the piano layout that we added to be able to find the appropriate file. So it can call the API endpoint for find open file, which as we can see here, returns the, let me move this up so that it's actually visible. Like so, finds the view or none if there is no such file. And it's doing all of that to be able to get this view, but now we can just say piano equals get piano view. And this is okay with the view not existing, in which case nothing happens. So we don't need to pass create. We don't need to focus it. This doesn't care if it has the focus. It just wants to be able to find it so that it can update it. So that is all we have to do for that. My numlock got turned on accidentally. So those lines are just that. Now this has to be here because we could just say if get piano view do this, but we need that to be able to do something. So there's that. And I think that's the only place where find open file. So piano tune, yeah, this is the thing that is actually playing things. This is what's responsible for when the playback happens, being able to update this. This may or may not be broken now. Oh, I may have broken the clickability. It was making sound a second ago. What? Oh, we don't need to do this anyway. This is the piano tune. Well, that's unrelated to this not working. It really seems like it should. I don't see why it wouldn't. What does this do? Hey. Well, I guess I have 30 seconds to figure out why this is not doing something. Is that obsessively loud? It is to me, but I'm next to the speaker. How do people on Jeopardy think with this music? I ask you. Okay. Okay. That wasn't playing that back either. So one other thing that we need to fix here, perhaps, is this. Only handle. Only handle the message that the piano has the focus. So we get the active view. That should still be okay. Oh, thank you, Ashwin. Yeah. For some reason, some MIDI files are louder than others. I guess that's technically a property of MIDI. Velocity could have something to do with it. Let's look at this thing. Boo. Save that. View.settings.get is piano is true. So what do we got going on here? Find view event listener. For piano event listener. That should be down here. Piano as the view event listener. View.settings.get syntax / piano.sublime. Oh, shoot. All right. Well, that would explain that, I guess. We're going to fix that, but I think we can also fix it by doing this. Settings.get his piano. Defaulting to false. I think if that was the case. And there we go. The reason why that doesn't work is because that code I added that applies the syntax totally has a stupid typo in it. Somewhere. Have the focus, jump it up, the one that creates the view. I think this is setting the syntax, even though the other thing is also setting the syntax. So let's try that again with this thing. It created it and that works. And if we asked its syntax, it's actually correct. Right on, right on. So let's go ahead and fix that, shall we? That is a stupid mistake. Stage that hunk. We don't need that. So now we know it's working. This is something that we haven't checked yet, but that we definitely know fixed it because we just saw it. So let's stage that hunk and amend the previous commit. Now the last thing is this bit here, and if we jump to that, that is not the thing, is it? Yes, that is the thing. Right. It used to be 3 lines, now it's not. This is piano tune play MIDI instruction. So I think that would be an example of this. I suppose just for our own edification, we could say spam the hell out of the console. Actually, we'll put it here. If this gets printed, then we know that this method is getting called, and we know that I understand this more than I perhaps think I do. Tune, play. What's the name of this thing? This really seems like it should be doing something here. Let's see. We'll look over here. Play tune. Boop, boop, boop. Play piano notes. So play tune. Does not do anything. So if we look for play tune command. Wait. Play piano notes. Pardon me. Okay. Play piano notes. That's this one. It has an is enabled. View event listener piano tune. So it's not enabling itself because it thinks that it's not enabled for the piano tune event listener. So piano tune event listener, which is this one. Syntax ends with piano tune.sublime-syntax. Well, that really seems like the syntax, doesn't it? Yeah, it totally does. Oh, look, it's totally here now. I'm going to wonder what that was all about. It's looking. Working good. Okay, so that is also a safe thing. Well, maybe we'll redact that instead. And stage that hunk and amend the previous commit. And we are looking at, 2 hours and 14 minutes. I've gone over, but I still have one more thing to do here, which is this last thing. Boop. One of the new things that changed in the recent build of Sublime is the, was it the recent one, one or two back? There's always been like, they did something with, actually, I suppose I could just do this. Change log. No, not that one. Pardon me. There's more than one of those, isn't there? Put the focus over here. This one pops this up. If we were to look back here, a couple of builds, there's items for, it might have been 4070, fixed the regression in key bindings for the space bar, so it may even be farther back than this. Improved compatibility with some keyboard layouts, and Mac improved compatibility with some keyboard layouts. I've been bumping into some weirdness where sometimes I'm trying to do something and I end up doing this. And I was confused by that because, well, I kind of expect sometimes that the numeric keypad doesn't do what you expect, but even when numlock's not on, it's doing something different. And I have this outliner thing that I've set up, and I can do this and do page up and page down. And I normally do that by the keypad, the numeric keypad buttons. If I do it here, it doesn't work. And I discovered just prior to the stream that if I did log input true, we can see that when you use the keypad buttons, we get the arrows there, page up, page down. That's what that looks like for those keys. But when I press Control and Alt, well, I mean, now it's not doing it. But it was doing keypad 9 and keypad 3. So those were appearing to be different things. So this is weird. I had to override what I was seeing to be able to do that. But note, if I push this, Control Alt Shift, page up and page down, Oh, there we go. It's the shift key that's doing it. Um, so anything I do that extends the keyboard or uses any of the stuff on the numeric keypad is now returning different keys than it used to, and it's been messing my head up. Now that I know that's the case, I can fix it. But it has been monumentally confusing, particularly since because of the way I fixed it, these keys don't no longer work. We want to replace open file with a command that uses get piano view, which will always be the active piano. So this is going to take an argument of which piano to use. This is going to be fairly simple because we already have the get piano view, right? Get piano view like so. We want to copy that and we'll add a new command. Whereabouts should we throw said command? It's like the first thing in that file. So maybe the first thing here, because the next thing after that is play piano notes and stop piano notes until this thing appeared, which I'm actually never played with now that I think about it. But we might want to say class show piano command, which is going to be well, I guess it could be application command because what do I care? There only needs to be one of them. And it's going to take an argument of piano layout equals none, I would say is the way to go. And then I can say piano layout equals piano layout or piano, oops, piano prefs for piano layout. There we go. So if you provide an argument, use it. Otherwise, do this. And most of the time when you use a setting, you always want it to be a particular thing. This is one of the rare cases you want this to be um, getting a default from there, but I kind of like that. And then we can say get piano view. We're going to say create equals true, focus equals true, and piano layout equals piano layout, like so. And that's literally all this command needs to be, because no matter when you call it, when you're calling show piano, you always want to see the piano, even if it's not there. So create it if it doesn't exist in any window. You definitely want it focused if it exists, but in another window, focus the other window. And you want to be able to specify a layout so that you could use show piano to swap it between two different layouts if you wanted to. So always pass in a layout and it'll use the current one that's configured if you don't specify it, or it'll use the one you use as an argument if you did. That would allow you to have multiple commands and swap them back and forth or bind them to a key. We don't want this command to ever disable itself because we always want to be able to show the piano. So I think that is pretty much all we need for that as well. So this just needs to be show piano. That's not it. And the argument would be piano layout. And that would be this one. So if this was the case, if I said show piano, where's the focus in this thing? Hiding. Oh, there it is. It's really hard to see the cursor when it's inside of these areas because the cursor is white. So there's that. But that definitely works. If I created, well, if I went to this alternate window and said show piano, boop, this one hops right up to the top. And again, it has the focus. Arguably, this could have an argument that says whether or not you want it to be focused or not. But we could also add something like this, just because we have the thing to be able to test. Show piano alt, and this could be piano 7 octave like this. or 6 octave, I should say. So now we can say show piano alt, and it swaps up there. And if we, it has the focus. And if we did the same thing again, it's still focused, but nothing changed because we know that the command is smart enough to not do that. And then we can show piano and pop it back up. This is not actually one we want in here, though. We want this command to be gone. We just want it to be that. As a matter of fact, we might not even want arguments in this thing at all because it's going to default to that one. So maybe we might even do a little bit of that because we know it's going to do what we want anyway. If we did show piano and closed it and then did show piano, it'll come back, which seems like a nice way to go. And that was the last item in our little to-do list here, which is that. So we can come over here and very easily, yeah, show piano is that. And we have a very simple new command. This is one of the nice things about having that. We now have a function that we can use, as we've seen in other parts of the package, to find the thing that we want and do something. And because we took the time to also uh, think that we want to have a single entry point into getting the piano view and manipulating it, it's really easy to leverage that in commands. So we can stage that up and then say add new show piano command. And that is good to go. And we technically don't need that thing anymore, so we don't really have to worry about that. But we have managed to do all of the things in the list, and we only went about 20 minutes over. And if you count the stupid bugs that I had in there, it's actually not too shabby. For bonus points, playing for as long as the mouse button is pressed for. Does that actually work? No, it doesn't. Da, da, da. This needs to be here because we need to know the actual position of the selection so we know what to do. One last thing, I was just curious about this. There can really only be one of these, I would think, right? Oh, hey, cool. Well, to answer your previous question, Astrid, you can't do it with the keyboard, but you can do it with the mouse. Let's do something like this. Found equals 0. Found plus equals 1. If found is greater than 0, return none. None. Okay, I guess we don't want that sort of functionality. That was just something I've been curious about. One of the things you can do when you're getting a command, oh, it's on post text command. Maybe that's why it's doing that. Let's just test this real quick. Let's say on text command instead and quit and restart it to make sure that the event listener goes away. Because the idea is, would it be possible to do this in a way where the selection doesn't get modified? But the answer to that is no. So that's something we'll worry about at a later date. But I'll need to quit and bring it back in order to put that back to the way that it was before. And a flat. Well, a sharp. Alrighty. Well, that is I think that's a good it's a good bit of work there. It seems like a good bit of work. We got a lot done. We made a lot of commits. So many commits. How many commits? This many commits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you count this one I did earlier that reorganized the contents of things before we got going. And unfortunately, this is going to be a real butt to unpop. So maybe that won't happen. But we managed to do in this stream, refactor settings to be a single function call, add a setting to control what piano was used, get the new endpoint which uses it and makes life a lot easier in general, and add a new command that leverages the whole thing. So I think that is not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. I think it should be theoretically um, safe to do something like this. I'm not going to trust it. I might, if doing what I did before, um, could do something real unfortunate. But there we're going to go with that action there. And the last thing we're going to need to do is something like that, I suppose. So that is going to be the stream for tonight. We actually managed to get a fair bit of refactoring done in the code. It's a little bit nicer, and we're getting ourselves to a point where a lot of the stuff we're doing can be rolled up into one particular place. And right now, there's a couple of different ways that um, doing something with playing MIDI notes or playing with the keyboard or the mouse can happen. It can interact and send messages, and also if you're using MIDI input or playing back a MIDI file, something else goes on. So one of the things we're working towards here is one global entry point for something that represents the piano. And anything that wants to do anything sends it a MIDI message, which will send it to the output and maybe also visualize it. And then a lot of the code will be a lot easier to do. And the step towards having a MIDI sequencer built into our text editor will actually come to fruition. But that, I think, is all we have here in. Hmm, yeah. Oh, I should probably not have done that, huh? That is really all we have for the stream tonight. So I'd like to thank you for watching. Remember, if you find this sort of thing interesting, then you could. No, you're not going to want to do that. You're not going to want to do that one. Oh, maybe I need to do something like this. I swear. Obs, it gives me fits, man. It gives me fits. If you enjoy the streams and the bumbling, I think after a year I'd be better. You can subscribe for more of these things. I do one of them every week at around the time that I did tonight, 8 p.m. PST. I announce them prior on Twitter, and I also schedule them ahead of time on YouTube as well. So if you're into this sort of thing, you can hop into here like Ashwin, ask questions, watch what's happening, get questions answered. If you have a question and I have an answer, I'll give it to you. It doesn't have to be related to what I'm doing right now by any stretch of the imagination. By and large, the whole idea behind these live streams is to give me an excuse to have a dedicated block of time to sit down and work with Sublime. Sometimes video production for other things and real life can get in the way. And this allows me to do something like that. Speaking of that, if I press this key sequence, then you can be reminded that I have another channel, which you can link to as well. It's also down in the description of the video if you like the tutorial videos that I do on a weekly basis. And currently on an alternating status, we are doing Plugin 101, teaching about packages and plugins in Sublime Text. One note, I am seriously pondering the idea of releasing something on the lines of maybe a 1.5 or 2 hour long plugin crash course, where we would start with nothing and install Sublime on Linux, showing you that what little you need to do to get started and work through some of the fundamental concepts. Nothing in any great depth because that's what the course is for, but for people that want to get their toes wet and see what's available. Is that something that seems interesting? Let me know down in the comments below. Or, I have another button here so that I could press, which is this one, which says you can tweet video suggestions to me at OdatNurd. But you could tweet anything you like, Sublime Text related, and I'll probably answer. Until the next live stream, though, I think that is where we're gonna go ahead and call it for tonight. I really wish I had named these things a little bit better, and so that is all we have. Thank you for watching. Thanks, Ashwin, for joining in on the fun. And until the next live stream, this is OdatNurd asking you to please have a sublime day. Probably should have clicked this button. One day, man. One day this is going to be so smooth.